Hello, and welcome to another second grade episode of Math Matters. My name is Mrs. Cook, and today we're going to be learning about how to collect and organize data in bar graphs. Let's get started today with a counting warm-up. Today we're going to count by fives. I'll help you get started, then you can keep counting as you see the numbers appear. We'll stop when we get to 50. And don't forget, we'll continue by counting backwards too. You'll see the numbers flash to help you keep track of where we are. Are you ready? Let's count. 5, 'and backwards. 'Great counting! You really know how to count by fives. What patterns do you notice when we count by fives? Take a moment to record them on your paper. Let's share some of the patterns that appear when we count by fives. As we read the chart we created from left to right, you probably noticed each number on the right is 5 more than the number on the left in that same row. Looking down the left-hand column, you may have noticed the number 5 appears and repeats in each number. Similarly, the zeros repeat in the numbers going down the right column. You may have noticed as you follow the numbers down the right-hand column that they increase or get bigger by 10. This counting probably sounds familiar to you as you've often counted 10, 20, 30. Did you notice that the numbers on the left-hand side also go up or increase by 10? For example, 5 plus 10 is 15. Then 15 plus 10 is 25. Noticing patterns can help us count by fives and continue the counting pattern as the numbers get bigger. In today's lesson, we're going to learn more about the process of data collection and how we can use bar graphs as a way to organize and make sense of the data we collect to answer the questions we are wondering. As you participate in today's lesson, think about how counting by fives can make it easier to understand data. We will have an opportunity for you to reflect on your learning at the end of the lesson. We'll continue to work on our Portrait of a Graduate skills today as we record our data in bar graphs and use our writing to keep track of our thinking and to share our ideas with others. Remember, you may have questions or make mistakes as you're learning new things today, and that's okay. You may find it helpful to write down any questions you might have while you're participating in today's lesson so that you can continue your learning with someone at home or when you talk again with your teacher. We are goal-directed and resilient learners, which means we don't give up and keep on trying. For today's lesson, it may be helpful to have some paper and a pencil or some crayons on hand so you can record your thinking or keep track of the data we share. Plain paper will work great, and if you have lined paper or graph paper at home, you can use that too. We will pause now to give you time to gather your materials. You may hear some words that are new to you today, so as we work together, listen for these words and try to make connections between them and what we are learning. The first word is table. This is a chart for organizing the data we've collected. Bar graph is a graph that uses bars to represent information collected. Row means across, going from left to right, and column means going up and down. Math is everywhere, and I'd like to share a picture with you from what it looks like at our house while we stay safe at home. What are you noticing? What connections can you make to this picture? And what do you wonder when you look at this picture? Maybe you noticed the trash bin or the box sitting outside. Did you notice the recycling picture? Are you wondering why there's so much trash? Or maybe you're wondering how many boxes and cans are in there. If you are like us, spending a lot of time at home means there's a lot of trash. We do our best to recycle what we can so we can do our part to take care of our environment. And it's important for us to try to reduce some of the trash we throw out. One way to stay mindful of this is to look at how much we are throwing away. So we started wondering, what's in our recycling? The first thing we needed to do was to collect data. So with our gloves on, we sorted through the recycling. What do you notice about how we sorted? Did you notice cans and glasses were separated into different piles? Plastic containers were grouped together, and there was a lot of paper and mail that went into another pile. Once we've sorted our data, we can begin counting. We can keep track of how many we count using tally marks or by recording the numbers in a table. Once we have counted all of our data, it can be helpful to display the numbers in a bar graph to make it easier to look for patterns and compare groups. A bar graph uses bars to represent the count of objects in each category or group. We'll use the numbers we counted when we sorted the recycling to help us build this bar graph. If you have paper and something to write with, you can follow along as we make this together. We will be using graph paper that has lines already drawn on it to help us organize our work. If you have some at home, that's great. And if you only have plain paper, you can make that work too by drawing your own lines. Let's get started. First, we'll start by labeling the categories or groups at the bottom of our graph. When making a bar graph, it's important to leave space between each of the labels to keep the categories separated. We will also add a title for these groups so that when someone else is reading our graph, they will know what these groups are about. These are the recycled items, so that is what we will put as the title for these groups. Next, we need to color in the bars to show how many items we collected in each group. But counting can be hard to keep track of with so many lines, so first we will add numbers on the left side of our graph. We will also add a label to tell us what these numbers stand for. Take a moment to write those numbers on your graph now, and don't forget to start with 0 on the bottom line. Now we are ready to fill in the bars. Let's do the first one together. For paper, we had 9 items, so we will color in the boxes above the title, Paper. Next, let's color in the bar to represent the number of plastic recycling items. Using the data from the table, where do you think we should draw the bar on our graph? That's right, we'll draw a bar that goes up to the number 6. Now you try to do the next 2 groups, glass and cans. Don't forget to leave a space between each bar. How did you do? There were 7 glass items, so the bar should go up to the 7. Cans also had 7 items, so it will also go up to 7. Now that we have all of the data represented by the bars on our graph, there's one more thing we need to remember to do. We need a title for our graph to communicate to others what our graph is about. What title would you give this graph? If you've been recording on your paper, go ahead and write it down now. Here's the title we decided to use. What's in our recycling? It's okay if it's different from yours, as long as you're sure that it gives others enough information so they know what your graph is about. Now that our data is organized in this bar graph, we can answer specific questions about what we notice. I'll read a statement about the recycling, and you use the data in the graph to tell whether it is true or false. Number 1, more plastic was recycled than paper. If you said this statement is false, you are correct. What did you see in the graph to help you know this was not true or false? That's right. When you look at the bars for paper and plastic and compare them, plastic is lower than paper with only 6 items, and paper is higher with 9 items. Let's try another one. The least amount of recycling came from plastic items. Is this true or false? This statement is true. Use the information in the graph to tell us how you know this is true. That's right. The lowest bar is the one that belongs to the plastic items. That means that the least number of items collected were plastic. The last statement reads, the same number of glass items were recycled as can items. Is this true or false? This statement is true. Prove how you know by using data in the bar graph to explain your thinking. That's right. The bars for both glass and cans are equal in height. Both show 7 items were collected in each category. This statement is true. Here's a challenge. Can you tell how many total pieces of recycled items were collected? Take a moment to find your answer. If you added up the total number of items collected from each category, you found that 29 items were recycled in total. Let's practice what we've learned about representing data in bar graphs by zooming in on this new graph. Take a moment to take a closer look at this graph and write down what you notice and what you might be wondering about this graph based on what you can see so far. Let's talk about the bars. Did you notice they're different colors? Maybe you wondered if the different colors mean something special. Maybe you noticed that some of the bars are taller and some are shorter. Did you notice the numbers on the left of the graph? Maybe you noticed they are in a pattern. The numbers count by fives so that we can fit more data and count higher in a smaller space. Were you wondering what the bars represent? If you have a prediction or an idea of what they might stand for, go ahead and say it now. If we zoom in some more, we see there's now new information on our graph. How does this change your thinking? What new wonderings do you have? You probably noticed that the bars on the graph are now labeled, well, almost all of them, with types of movies. And the numbers on the left represent the number of students. Do you have a prediction about what the last type of movie might be? It looks like there are a lot of students that picked that category. Also, are you wondering what the title of this graph might be? What might be the question this data is answering? Here are the final missing pieces to the graph. Were your predictions right about the final category? Now we know the last category of movies is comedy. We can also see now that this graph is about favorite movies by looking at the title. By zooming in on the graph in small pieces at a time, we were really able to spend more time making sense of each part separately before answering any questions about the graph. But now I think we're ready. I'll read the tasks in the grid and then give you a few moments to pick one or two that you can try using the data shown here in the graph. What statements can you make about comedies? What statements can you make about action movies? What statements can you make comparing action movies and musicals? What statements can you make comparing comedies to musicals? We'll pause here to give you some time to work. You learned a lot about how to collect data and display it in bar graphs in today's episode of Math Matters for 2nd grade. First, you selected a question to be answered, then you collected and organized the data. Finally, you learned how to create a bar graph to show your data and to help answer questions. How did you do today working towards our learning goals? Reflect on your progress by selecting which emoji best matches how you're feeling about today's lesson. A smiley emoji if you got it and are feeling good. A thinking emoji if you think you understand but need more practice. And the confused emoji if you feel like you have more questions or could use some help with today's lesson. As you think about the learning goals for today, maybe there's something new you learned that you don't want to forget. Or maybe there's something we talked about today that you still have questions about. Take a minute to record your reflections on today's lesson and save them for the next time you're able to check in with your teacher. Mathematicians are skilled communicators who are goal-directed and resilient. During our lesson today, you worked on writing to record and communicate your ideas through graphing. You also persevered or kept on trying as you learned new mathematical ideas, even if it was hard. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Math Matters for 2nd grade. My name is Mrs. Cook, and I hope you'll join us again tomorrow as we continue to learn more about data and graphing. Have a great day.